And nobody's ever asked me, really asked me, do you have any remorse about what happened? Even though it was self-defense. Sure, I have remorse every day. You know, I thought about this several times a day, every day for 32 years. You know, I wish it hadn't have happened. Sorry it happened. If I could change it, I would, but I can't. And I know that leaving a young wife with kids, it's hard on her, and well, it's been hard on me for 32 years too. I want cops to protect me just like they do everybody else. I did not carry a gun to protect myself against cops. But the crowd that I ran with, that's why I carried a gun, because most of them carried a gun, you know, and it was just to protect myself against them. I've never had nothing against cops. I know they got a job to do, and I don't have a hard feelings with cops. Many times a day, you know, I wish it had never happened, you know, and it's something I can't change, you know. That day, when I took that gun with me that day to go to the radiator shop, I had no intentions of using it on anybody. It was just another normal day to me. Just like I do every day, I read my Bible and I'll read other books. I like to read. And I'm too old to go out. They let the other inmates go out to recreation 1 hour a day, and they got what they call the yard. They can go out there for 1 hour, unless it's raining. But I'm too old. I've got a pinched nerve in my leg, and I can't go to the day room and walk around because I can't stand up that long. And I have to use to take a shower, I have to use, they've got a medical shower, a handicap shower that's got rails on the side and in a place where you can sit down, you know, because I can't stand up on two legs. And I'm really, physically, I have bad kidneys. I'm sorry it happened. My heart aches every day for her and her kids. So maybe my execution will set their mind at ease a little bit. I mean, you know, I can't bring their dad back, but maybe by me being executed, maybe they can finally put this thing behind them, you know, and look to the future.
Carl Wayne Bunchon was the oldest death row inmate ever executed in Texas. He was convicted of killing Houston police officer James Herby during a traffic stop in 1990. But many said the real failure wasn't just Bunchon. It was the prison system itself. This wasn't his first crime. Years earlier, Bunchon had been convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage girl and sent to prison. But because of system failures, he was released on parole and never properly monitored. Free again, he grew even more dangerous until the day he gunned down Officer Herby during a routine duty post. And the most shocking part, Officer Herby wasn't even speaking to Bunchon. He was speaking to the driver for breaking traffic rules while Bunchon was seated in the passenger seat of the same car. Officer Herby was simply handling a routine traffic stop with calm and professionalism when Bunchon suddenly stepped out of the car and opened fire. Later, Bunchon gave his own reasons for killing the officer, explanations that left the public stunned. In this video, we'll explain why Bunchon was let out of prison after assaulting a teenage girl, what happened at the officer's duty post, the 2 reasons he decided to kill Officer Herby, and the full story of the crime that shocked Houston. Before we dive deeper into this case, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to The True Crime Teller, because you're about to hear the story of a man who killed an officer for a ridiculous reason. The story begins back in the 1980s. Carl Wayne Bunchon was convicted of assaulting a teenage girl, a crime considered severe enough that he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. That sentence should have kept him behind bars until the mid-2000s. But at the time, Texas prisons were in crisis, and that crisis would lead to deadly consequences. By the late 80s and early 90s, overcrowding had spiraled out of control. Facilities built for a limited number of inmates were packed far beyond capacity. It created dangerous conditions for both staff and prisoners, and the entire system was under intense pressure. To ease the strain, the state turned to early release programs, freeing inmates before their full sentences were served. Bunchon was one of them. Despite being sentenced to 15 years for a serious offense against a minor, he served just 13 months before being released on parole in April 1990. A man who should have been incarcerated for over a decade was suddenly back on the streets. Like all parolees, his release came with strict conditions. Report to a parole officer, find a job, and stay out of trouble. These weren't suggestions. They were legal requirements. Violating them meant going straight back to prison, but Bunchon had no intention of following the rules. Just weeks after his release, he missed a required check-in with his parole officer. That alone should have triggered an immediate response, a warrant, a search, something. But the system failed again. The same system that let him out early didn't keep track of him once he was free. For 30 days, Bunchon remained out in the world unsupervised with no one watching and no one noticing. By June 1990, he had been out for 2 months, violating parole for weeks. Yet he was still roaming the streets of Houston, unnoticed, unstopped, and more dangerous than ever. Everything turned deadly on June 27, 1990. Houston police officer James Herby was on his regular motorcycle patrol, handling traffic and responding to calls in his area. At the corner of Airline Drive and Lyerly Street, he spotted a traffic violation. For him, it was routine work, something he had done thousands of times in his 17-year career. He turned on his emergency lights and pulled over a Pontiac sedan with 2 men inside. The driver was 42-year-old John Earl Killingsworth. In the passenger seat sat 46-year-old Carl Wayne Bunchon. Bunchon had a .357 revolver with him and was paranoid about his parole violations. What Officer Herby didn't know was that the car's trunk was hiding heroin. Bunchon was convinced police already had a warrant for his arrest. Officer Herby followed standard procedure. He walked up to the driver's side and began speaking with Killingsworth about the traffic violation. It was calm and professional, nothing unusual. Herby had no reason to think he was dealing with anything more than a traffic stop. But Bunchon saw it differently. In his paranoid state, he believed the stop was really about him, that Herby was there to arrest him for violating parole. The truth was, Herby didn't even know who Bunchon was. As Herby continued talking with the driver, Bunchon made a deadly choice. He stepped out of the passenger side, revolver in hand. Without warning, he raised the gun and fired a single shot into Officer Herby's head. Herby collapsed instantly, fatally wounded. But Bunchon didn't stop there. As the officer lay on the ground, he walked around the car and fired 2 more shots into Herby's back. The act was pure brutality against a man who was already dying. Witnesses at the scene were horrified. They had just seen a police officer executed in broad daylight for no reason. Then Bunchon began firing toward the bystanders, turning his rage on anyone who had seen what happened. Instead of running, some witnesses showed remarkable courage. One man, Elmore Bro, rushed to Herby's motorcycle and used the police radio to call for help. His quick thinking alerted Houston police officers right away. Another witness, Richard Castillo, picked up Officer Herby's service weapon and held Killingsworth, the driver, at the scene until backup arrived. Meanwhile, Bunchon tried to escape. He fired at bystanders, attempted to carjack a driver at a stop sign, and even shot at another responding officer. His run didn't last long. Police chased him into a nearby warehouse, where he finally surrendered without a fight. The murder of Officer James Herby sent shockwaves through Houston. This wasn't just another homicide. It was the cold-blooded killing of a police officer. Detectives moved quickly. The crime scene evidence was clear. Herbie's motorcycle still in place, shell casings on the ground, and Bunchon's revolver recovered. Witnesses confirmed exactly what they saw. Bunchon had executed the officer, but the investigation uncovered something even darker. Friends of Bunchon told detectives that he had said before he would rather die in a shootout with police than go back to prison. He had been carrying that mindset for years. On top of that, detectives discovered a personal grudge. Bunchon's twin brother, Kenneth, had been killed in a 1971 shootout with Houston police. Carl had vowed revenge. To investigators, this explained why he reacted with such violence that day. It wasn't just fear of going back to prison. It was nearly 20 years of anger boiling over. As for John Killingsworth, the driver, he was charged for the heroin found in his trunk, but investigators confirmed he had no idea Bunchon planned to kill a cop. The case against Bunchon was airtight. He had been caught at the scene, the murder weapon in hand, and dozens of witnesses ready to testify. The community's grief was overwhelming. Officer Herbie's funeral was held at Second Baptist Church with more than 4,000 people in attendance, including officers from across the state. For Herbie's wife, Maura, the pain was crushing. She was only 29 years old, suddenly a widow, and the single mother of 2 children. Their son Cody was just 3 years old, and their daughter Callie was only 1. They would grow up without their father, a man who had been so excited to see their ball games and take his little girl to father-daughter dances. Houston had lost a veteran officer, Maura and her children had lost a husband and father, and it all happened because Carl Wayne Bunchon was given a second chance he should have never had. The prosecution of Carl Wayne Bunchon started strong. From the outside, it looked like an open and shut case. There were eyewitnesses. The murder weapon was recovered, and Bunchon, he was arrested at the scene. But what should have been a straightforward trial turned into a long, complicated fight for justice. Harris County District Attorney Johnny Holmes took on the case. It was the most high-profile murder in Houston at the time, and Holmes knew it wasn't just about convicting a killer. It was about sending a clear message. If you murder a police officer, you'll face the full power of the law. The state charged Bunchon with capital murder, which meant he could get the death penalty. But right away there was a problem. The murder had been all over the news. The public already knew the details, and in a city as big as Houston, that made finding a fair and unbiased jury almost impossible. So Bunchon's lawyer, Alan Tanner, filed for a change of venue and won. The trial was moved to Fredericksburg, about 200 miles west of Houston. In October 1990, jury selection began. The prosecutors needed people who could not only look at the facts objectively, but also consider giving the death penalty if the evidence called for it. That ruled out a lot of people right away, especially anyone with strong moral or religious objections to capital punishment. The defense knew they were facing an uphill battle. The evidence was overwhelming. Bunch had been caught red-handed. There was no denying what he did. So instead of fighting the facts, the defense focused on saving his life during the penalty phase. Their best hope was to convince the jury to choose life in prison over the death penalty. The trial began in January 1991, about 7 months after Officer James Herbie was killed. Prosecutors wasted no time. They brought in eyewitnesses, people who had seen the entire thing. One after another, they described the same story. Officer Herbie had been calm and respectful during the traffic stop. He showed no aggression, no threats. He was just doing his job. Ballistics matched the .357 revolver found at the scene to the bullets that killed Herbie. Even the shell casings lined up with witness testimony. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Bunch was guilty. The jury took just 34 minutes to decide. On January 24, 1991, Carl Wayne Bunchon was found guilty of capital murder. The next phase of the trial began immediately. Should he live or die? The state laid out Bunchon's long criminal record, burglary, drugs, property crimes, and most seriously, an earlier conviction for assaulting a minor. They reminded the jury that Bunton had been out on parole when he killed Officer Herbie, and he'd even said he'd rather shoot it out with cops than go back to prison. To the prosecution, it was clear this man would always be a danger. The defense shared details about Bunchon's rough childhood, abuse, violence, mental health issues, but the jury wasn't given clear instructions on how to use that information when deciding his punishment. In the end, it didn't matter. That same day, January 24th, 1991, the jury sentenced Carl Wayne Bunchon to death. Years passed. In 1995, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld both the conviction and the sentence. But that wasn't the end. In 2003, Bunchon's legal team filed new appeals, arguing that his trial wasn't fair and that his lawyers hadn't done enough. Those appeals were denied. Then in 2009, a new argument worked. The court ruled that during Bunchon's original trial, the jury hadn't been given proper instructions on how to consider his background. Basically, they heard about his abuse and mental health, but weren't told how to factor that in. The conviction stayed, but the death sentence was thrown out. So in 2012, 21 years after the original trial, Bunchon was back in court, this time for a new sentencing trial. But it wasn't easy. Some witnesses had passed away, others had moved. Memories had faded. For Officer Herbie's wife, Maura, and their 2 kids, it was heartbreaking to go through it all again. They had thought it was over. Still, the prosecution stuck to the same facts. Bunchon killed a police officer. He had a long, violent record. He'd never shown real remorse. He was dangerous. The defense was now allowed to go deeper into his mental health, childhood trauma, and other mitigating factors. But the jury didn't see it as enough. On March 6, 2012, they sentenced Carl Wayne Bunchon to death again. What followed was a long, final stretch of appeals. His lawyers argued that the decades of delays had made the death penalty meaningless. They pointed out that Bunchon was now in his late 70s, in a wheelchair, and suffering from health issues like arthritis and vertigo. In 2021, they filed one last appeal claiming that executing him now would be cruel and unusual punishment. But that challenge was rejected. By April 2022, everything was in place. Bunchon had become the oldest person on Texas death row, and the state was ready to move forward. Just before the execution, Bunchon got pneumonia. Then he hit his head during transport. His lawyers begged the state to delay or cancel the execution, but the answer was no. On April 21, 2022, the day of his execution, Carl Wayne Bunchon woke up inside the Huntsville unit. At 78 years old, he was the oldest inmate on Texas death row. That morning, he reportedly looked frail, moving slowly and needing help to get around because of his health problems. Like every condemned prisoner, he was given the chance to request a final meal. Bunchon kept it simple, choosing the same food served to other inmates that day. He didn't make a special request. As the hours passed, he met with his spiritual advisor, Barry Brown, who prayed with him and tried to keep him calm. Bunch spoke about having remorse for his crime, but he also admitted he was ready for it all to be over. When evening came, he was led into the execution chamber. Witnesses included members of Officer James Herbie's family, prison officials, and reporters. Outside, dozens of motorcyclists gathered to honor Officer Herbie, revving their engines as a sign of respect for the fallen officer. Inside, Bunchon was strapped to the gurney. He was given the chance to make a final statement, and he chose to speak directly to the Herbie family. His words were, "I do have remorse for what I did. I pray to God that they get the closure for me killing their father and Miss Herbie's husband. I hope to see you in heaven someday, and when you show up, I'll give you a big hug." He then friends and said goodbye. His spiritual advisor placed a hand on his chest and prayed as the lethal injection began. Bunchon coughed once, took a few final breaths, and at 6:39 p.m., he was pronounced dead. For Maura Herbie, James Herbie's widow, the moment was emotional and overwhelming. She said afterward, "I felt like I took the deepest breath I've been able to in the last 32 years. I felt joy, but I'm also sorry someone died. I just didn't think of him as a person. I mean, he was like a cancer on the face of my family." For many in Houston, the execution closed a chapter that had haunted the city since 1990. The murder of Officer James Herbie during what should have been a routine traffic stop. Even after Buntion's execution, people in Houston remained divided. Many blamed the prison system for letting him out in the first place and for failing to arrest him again when he violated parole. They argued that if the system had done its job, Officer Herbie would still be alive. They keep pointing to Bunchon's own reasons for the killing. Bunchon claimed he thought Officer Herbie was about to arrest him for breaking parole, but Herbie wasn't even talking to him. He was simply handling a routine traffic stop. How could an officer who wasn't interacting with him and who didn't even know his background be trying to arrest him? Bunchon's second excuse was even more personal. He said he wanted revenge for his twin brother who was killed in a shootout with police in Houston back in 1971. But others believe Bunchon himself was simply wayward. After all, plenty of other prisoners were released on parole, and most followed the rules. Bunchon chose not to. So what do you think? Was this tragedy the fault of a broken system, or was Bunchon just determined to cause trouble no matter what? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, if you found this case breakdown from the True Crime Teller insightful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story we uncover. Never.